All right, at 4:30, call the meeting of the Kerrville Planning and Zoning Commission to order. Dorothy, would you please take roll?
Yes, sir. Garrett Harmon,
Here.
Rustin Zuber,
Here.
David Jones,
Here.
David Lipscomb,
Here.
Cliff Tuttle,
Here.
Hunter Patterson,
Here.
Tricia Byram.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dorothy. All right, agenda item number 1 is minutes of our last meeting. Any questions or comments on those minutes? I'll accept a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
I'll second.
We have a motion to approve and a second. All in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carries 7-0. All right. Item number 2A is a final plat. Drew?
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon. 2A is consideration and final action concerning a final plat for replatting Lot 25 or Tract 25 of Kerrville South Ranches Number 1, a subdivision in Kerr County. The applicant is requesting approval of the final plat in 2 separate tracts, one being 6.11 acres, or the existing being 6.11 acres, resulting in 2.31 and 3.80 acres for 25A and 25B. It is located within the Kerrville ETJ. On your map, you can see the little red or pink line to the left of the parcel is the ETJ. Again, this is an existing tract. There's the plat to be subdivided. As you can see, the plat to the northwest has already been subdivided into several other smaller lots. It's consistent with the subdivision regulations and subdivision ordinance, and staff recommends approval. Be pleased to answer any questions. And the applicant is on the phone if we have any questions.
I do have a question, just quickly looking at the as platted. It's hard for me to understand. Is 25 and 18 being platted into 25A and 25B?
No, this is just 25.
Oh, okay.
Just a second. So this is lot 25.
Okay.
There is a road easement that runs between 25 and 18. And so this is actually a replat of lot 18 to the northeast.
Okay.
Is it a road easement or a road?
There's a road there, but it's not it's an easement, so on the, as platted, it shows up as part of the parcels. But yes, there is an existing road there. That's, excuse me, Ridgecrest Drive.
Shows on the vicinity map.
So we're going from 6 acres to 3.8 and a 2.3?
That's correct.
And access to 25B will be off of that other road?
They're showing a proposed access off of Ridgecrest Drive. There's currently a shared driveway for these 2 structures coming off Tierra Grande. But it will have access to, each have access to a street.
Are there existing structures?
Yes, there are. I don't have anything zoomed in closer than that.
But they don't have utilities or anything crossing the property lines?
No, because they're on well and septic.
Separate. What, I mean, are there 2 houses on this lot?
Yes, there are 2 houses, and that's why they're subdividing the lot.
And they have, both of them have septic and all that?
That's correct. Mr. Vogel, are you there?
Can you hear me?
Do you have anything else to add, Mr. Vogel?
Yes, sir, I'm here. I was just gonna maybe go over, there are 2 residences that are existing, and one will be on each of the lots that we're creating. They both are on a approved septic from the county. The county, of course, has signed the plat, and then they also are on a public water system, both of them.
Do they have individual septic systems?
Yes, sir, they do. Each lot and each house now on each lot will already has it existing, has its own system, correct?
Okay. All right.
We need to, it's a final plat and a replat?
A replat is a final plat.
Okay, so
Yeah,
it's just a
one
final
action.
plat. Okay, one action.
Okay, any other questions or concerns, commissioners? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion, we accept the final plat as presented.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the final plat. All in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carries 7-0. Item 3A is a public hearing on, oh, no, that has been postponed. 3A has been postponed.
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and announce that. 3A was a ordinance to change from R1 to C1 on approximately 1.72 acres out of High Point at River Hill. That case number 2020-031 has been postponed until September. So notices will go back out to adjacent property owners. And of course, the agenda is advertised in the paper and the website, but that'll be moved to the next agenda.
Okay. And then 3B is a conditional use.
Yes, 3B is a public hearing, consideration action to recommend a resolution to allow a conditional use permit for a short-term rental on lot 16R, block 41JA Tivy Edition, more commonly known as 1220 North Street. Before we bring the applicant on, I just want to go over cover a couple questions that I've gotten from commissioners regarding conditional use permits. Sorry about that. Martin, we good?
Not as much as we are.
Okay. From the zoning code, a conditional use is a use of the property designated in the land use matrix, which otherwise would not be permitted in a specific zoning district, but may become compatible through the imposition and compliance with conditions related to the development of the specific property. So the recommendation from the Planning Commission, of course, going through the public hearing process and considering any comments from the public, the Planning and Zoning Commission has two different options: to grant the conditional use permit with conditions as recommended by staff or as amended by the Planning Commission. And the other option is to deny the application with grounds that the use, even with the additional conditions, to be incompatible with the adjacent properties, the goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan, or other relevant factors as they apply to that case. So conditional use permits are a case-by-case consideration for the board. Again, if we can apply conditions to make it compatible with the area, we can amend those conditions. You do have some staff recommended conditions in your backup for both of these next two cases. If we need to add additional conditions, we can certainly work through that before or after the public hearing. If there are not enough conditions that we can apply to make that use compatible, then you do have, of course, the ability to deny that case. As you know, our staff comments are based on policy. How does it fit the comprehensive plan? How does it fit the zoning code? So we go through those. Staff comments do not take into account any public input because that comes at the public hearing for the commission and city council to look into. And then additionally, had a question regarding the termination of a conditional use permit. So as long as the conditional use permit does take use either through starting that actual land use or through a building permit, that conditional use permit stays in place until the director has, by finding of the director, the actual use of the property has not occurred for a period of 180 days after the commencement. So once it starts and then ceases to be used for that conditional use, the CUP would be removed, as long as it's not removed by fire, flood, or natural disaster. Then of course they have some grandfathering clauses that would come into play.
One question regarding that, does that transfer with ownership?
It would. So that use would continue even though it transferred to owners, unless there's a break more than 180 days, and the new owner would have to go through a new conditional use permit process. With that, I don't believe we have the applicant online, at least not ahead of time. Keisha, do we have Mr. Ariola on the line?
No, we do not.
Okay. I guess we'll forego the applicant's presentation. I'll just go through staff comments. There's a site plan for reference. There were 29 letters mailed out on July 23rd. We've received 2 letters back, and I'll read those into the record shortly. The adjacent uses and zoning is R1A for this neighborhood. The request, of course, is for a short-term rental unit on this property. Subject property and the surrounding area are all designated neighborhood residential in the Kerrville 2050 comprehensive plan. It is on a residential street. There is no traffic impact anticipated. And the parking for a short-term rental requires 1 parking space per bedroom and 1 additional parking space for an off-site manager. In this case, there'd be 2 parking spaces required. With the subject property located in the R1A zoning district, the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan and zoning policies if they get the conditional use permit approved. Staff recommends approval of the conditional use permit with consideration and inclusion of the attached proposed CUP conditions. And note that these are staff recommendations only, and the commission can amend those as needed. Go through those conditions. It'll be tied to the site plan as you see on the screen, that they provide guest notification, that the owner or operator provide notification to the guests that the unit is in a residential area, and obviously be respectful of that because they are in a neighborhood. They are required to pay occupancy taxes under Chapter 94 of the City Code of Ordinances, and of course any other zoning regulations would still apply. And if there are any other folks on the line that would like to speak to this case, you can raise your hand in the Zoom app or press *9 on the telephone. I do have 2 letters that came in since the packet was published. I'll read into the record. To whom it may concern, I, Dustin Storms of 1210 North Street, Kerrville, Texas, am not in favor of the conditional use permit for a short-term rental unit on lot 16R, block 41JA Tybee, 1220 North Street, case number 2020-033. We have young daughters who routinely play in our neighborhood. We chose this property to be our permanent residence because it was so close to school, BT Wilson. As such, there are restrictions on who is allowed to make their permanent residence within a certain distance around a school. Convicted sexual predators and child molesters are not allowed to make homes in the neighborhood their primary residence. There is no law that I've found that restricts a convicted child molester that can rent a short-term lodging facility. Therefore, we would be opening up the neighborhood to many small children, where many small children live, and potential predators. This repurposing of a residential lot can have negative impacts to the home values in our area. Having a short-term rental within 200 feet of our home will undoubtedly cause a decline in our home values and make it more difficult to market effectively in both selling our property for long-term rental or for primary residence. And another letter. To whom it may concern, my name is Miranda Storms. My husband and I own and reside at 1210 North Street, along with our daughters. We strongly opposed to the rezoning of the property at 1220 North Street into a short-term rental property for multiple reasons. First and foremost, the safety reasons. We have 5 daughters and strive to provide a safe home and environment for them to live and play and grow up in. One of the reasons this property appealed to us when we were searching for a house is the proximity to BT Wilson. Owning a home less than a mile away from a school would ensure that any registered sex offenders would not be able to purchase or rent near our home. Though a stay in a short-term rental would, from everything I'm able to find, allow the law to slip through the cracks, so to speak, and could potentially put a registered sex offender residing, even temporarily, 2 doors down from our family, as well as just down the street from a school that has many children walking to and from their homes each day. Another reason I'm opposed to the rezonings of the aforementioned property is for parking reasons. Most families on this street have at least one vehicle that is parked along the curb and in the street more often than not because that works best for them. This already presents some traffic flow issues, at least on our block, especially on the weekends where there tends to be more visitors and gatherings, which is usually when most short-term rental houses would have their highest amount of customers. I can foresee this only adding to the number of cars parked on the street and contributing to the traffic flow concerns on North Street. I do not see any reason why rezoning a property that is in the middle of a residential neighborhood full of families into a short-term rental is a smart and positive decision for the city of Kerrville and our neighborhood. Please feel free to contact me if you have any further questions. Is there anyone else on the line to speak for this case during the public hearing?
No, sir, there is no one else.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Next item. I'm sorry. Commissioners, any thoughts?
Well, there's a short-term rental right across on the corner of North Street, across from BT Wilson already. It's that little B&B bungalow deal. It's 2 blocks from here.
Okay.
It's on the other side. I mean, it's literally 2 blocks from this. They're customers of mine, and I go by there every day.
Well, it's 2 blocks from this location?
Yeah. It's on the other side of, so BT Wilson's right there on the map. It's just on the other side on the top left corner.
That's the school there in the.
Yeah, so there's a 2-unit, actually it's a 3-unit B&B on that corner.
Right here.
Just on the other side of, you see the parking lot? If you went to the top corner of it's just right about there, yeah.
It's probably not in your purview and whatever else, but can you speak to this concern they've expressed about the sexual predators?
I am not familiar enough to know if that is an issue with the short-term rental or not. So, not intelligently anyway.
I'll say that just in general, I do have some concerns about allowing short-term rental in the middle of a residential neighborhood. If it's closer to an amenity, the river trail, downtown shopping,
This one's definitely a little bit in a strange place.
something like that, I can understand that. And I don't think we need to go back and try to rewrite the zoning code again to try and accommodate this. Like Drew said, the conditional use, puts it into a category where it can be judged on a case-by-case basis. I agree with some of the statements in the letters regarding the proximity to public school. It's just, I guess in my opinion, short-term rentals don't really have a place in the middle of a typical residential neighborhood just because enforcement on the activity is much harder to do, I feel. Now, just long-term renters, they have more of an investment in the neighborhood. Some people are good about being tenants, some are not, but they still have a little bit more of an investment in the neighborhood and what goes on, and are held accountable a little bit more to what goes on than somebody who's just there for a weekend or a few days. I hadn't even thought about the issue with sexual predators. I think it's a valid point. If this was located in less of a residential area where not as many kids are around, I think that there may be some options there. But, for me personally, most short-term rentals don't belong in the middle of a typical residential neighborhood. Those are just my thoughts.
Well, and if this was like on a corner or on a main thoroughfare, it'd make more sense because that, like I said, the one on Tybee Street and North Street in the corner there, it's a main thoroughfare, and it's walking distance to downtown. I mean, it makes sense. And there's actually another one going to come online on Tybee Street about 4 houses down from that same one. But tucked over here in this little sleepy neighborhood seems a little weird. I don't know.
Yeah, if you're in the middle of an R1 neighborhood and the short-term rental is not gonna function like single-family residence, which is what that neighborhood is supposed to function as. Like you say, in a special situation, like we have looked at in the past, you know, it's maybe a special property, or like Garrett said, an amenity nearby, more of a vacation spot. I think that's the intent of the CUP, not just in the middle of any random R1 neighborhood.
I don't know I mean, I walk down Grime Street every morning and then turn back around BT Wilson, but it's not really like you usually see these B&B homes or these short-term rentals and like the little cute little historic parts of the town, and that's not it.
Right.
Not sure what the appeal is there. Not that that matters in this decision, but just.
Well, I think it does to a certain degree, and, you know, also the fact that we have residents in the neighborhood that have voiced some concerns about it, that's something we definitely need to take into consideration. Commissioners, are there any other thoughts? I'd hear a motion.
Motion to deny.
We have a motion to deny,
I'll second it.
and we have a second. So we have a motion and a second to deny the application. All in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carries 7-0. Okay. Next item on the agenda. Item, let me find it. At 1200 Barbara Ann Street.
Yes, thank you. 3C is a public hearing, consideration and action to recommend a resolution to allow a conditional use permit for a short-term rental on lot 17, block 1, Virgil Merrill 6, more commonly known as 1200 Barbara Ann Street. There were 27 letters mailed out. Notification was published in the Daily Times on July 16th. The adjacent area is zoned R1 surrounding this neighborhood. The subject property in the surrounding area is also designated as neighborhood residential in the Kerrville 2050 plan. The project is not on a thoroughfare, it's on a residential street. There is no traffic impact anticipated. The parking for the short-term rental again requires 1 space per bedroom and 1 additional space for the off-site manager, in which case this would be required 4 parking spaces. There's the aerial of the property. They indicated they do have room in that driveway for 4 parking spaces, therefore meeting the code. Excuse me, too far. With the project being located in an R1 zoning district and going through the public hearing and approval process for a conditional use permit, it is consistent with Kerrville 2050 plan and the zoning code. This proposed short-term rental does have 3 bedrooms, providing for 4 parking spaces as required, and staff recommends the case for approval with the conditions as listed in your backup. The same conditions as the last one. Tied to the site plan as you've seen here, the guest notification notifying any guests that they are located within a residential neighborhood. They are required to pay occupancy taxes under Chapter 94 of the Code of Ordinances and any other zoning regulations that may apply. I know we have a couple callers. If there are any other callers that have called in since the meeting began, if you'd like to speak on this item, please raise your hand in the Zoom app or press *9 on the telephone. First we have Stuart and Debbie Calkins. Mr. and Mrs. Calkins, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, you have 3 minutes.
Okay, yeah, I'm Stuart Calkins. I live at 1201 Barbara Ann. We have lived there for the last 34 years. And I'll start off with, my belief that neighborhoods are for neighbors. Back in June, when it became a short-term rental, we were looking for neighbors and we knew something was wrong real quick when we were seeing different people come in every other night and coming in all hours of the day and night and staying for short term. You know, we would go outside and there would be people just out in the yard staring at us. And it was just a very uncomfortable feeling. You know, we even saw the ad for it, that it was just advertising for update people and all kinds of amenities like poker table, foosball table, and it was a, you know, very, very less expensive way to stay than it would be to go to a local motel or hotel. So, which I think is a concern there. You know, we had this fear that it could easily just turn into a party house. And that was just pretty unnerving to us. You know, we feel that it would be the first domino that would cause us to lose our neighborhood. We're very close. The neighbors, we've all kind of come together that this is not something we want in our residential neighborhood. It was kind of discomforting to us. And so, you know, I believe that there are negatives, like I mentioned, hotels, that it could cause more short-term rentals to be available, forcing it very difficult for long-term rentals and shortage and at this time of shortages in housing. So I think it's time. I really liked what I heard about what you made about the decision on the first short term, and I think you did something very enforceable and effective, and I appreciate that. And I hope you take that in regard for our neighborhood as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next we have Missy Von Robinson. Ms. Robinson, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Please state your name and address for the record, and you have 3 minutes.
I'm Yvonne Robinson. I live at 1202 Barbara Ann. I've lived here for 15 and a half years. I have several concerns of turning this house into a B&B. I agree with the Calkins. Additionally, I live right next door. I share a property line with this property, and I can look down into their backyard, and they can also look right up into my property. I feel uncomfortable that strangers, people that I do not know, I don't know what they're capable of, can come and go in our neighborhood. The other concern is the parking. Now, the guests in June, they all parked in the south curb, along the south curb, along the west curb, which is directly across from the Calkins. And they also used my driveway for 2 days. And I feel like the owners of the property should have informed their guests that they can't use the neighbors' parking spaces for their own. It causes congestion. On Barbara Ann, it comes to a curve at the end of the street to the left. When the family, which has several members, parks, they also use the curb. So when those guests parked in front of 1200, they made quite a congestion problem because there was very narrow thoroughfare there. And if somebody was coming down the hill or even coming up around the curve up the hill, I see safety concerns. You've got people walking, you've got seniors walking, you've got young people with carriages, you've got people with pets. And in that circumstance, if the parking is congested, I have concern about that. I also have concern about property values and resale value. I mean, if I were to try to sell my property, I would have to
15
disclose
seconds.
that next door is a B and B. I also feel that because the owners did this really illegally before they even asked for a permit to do this, I'm concerned that they wouldn't enforce or inform their guests as to the rules if they did get the right to use the property as a B and B.
Okay,
And I guess that's my concerns.
all right. Thank you. We appreciate that.
Keisha, do we have any other callers?
Yes, we have one caller, Miss Martha Rowlett.
Okay, Ms. Rowlett, state your name and address for the record. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, I'm Martha Rowlett, and I live at 1204 Barbara Ann, next to Yvonne. And I just feel very strongly that this is a residential neighborhood for single families. And the fact that I don't know who's coming and going, and like Yvonne said, the traffic along that curve, I've lived here for 12 years, and all the neighbors know each other here, and they're all very tight, and I just don't feel like a B&B is proper for this neighborhood. That's all.
All right, thank you.
Is that all of the callers?
That's all the callers.
All right, thank you. I do have a couple more letters to read into the record. For those that called in, I will not read their letters, but you do have them in your backup for reference.
Can we make a motion to have you read them later, since we seem to have the sense of it?
I'll try to read them briefly.
Very well.
Given our public hearing situation, we're trying to make sure that we have enough opportunity for the public to give their input. Dear sirs, I am writing to protest the request for a permit for the short-term rental in our neighborhood. This is for the 1200 Barbara Ann. This is a quiet neighborhood of homeowners, and no retail or commercial activity should be allowed in the neighborhood. I reside at 1206 Barbara Ann. There are only 2 houses between us, and I don't want my property values harmed by such uses. Thank you for registering this opposition. I believe that's Betty Whitten. We are Beryl and Cardenwright, property owners of 1209 Barbara Ann Street. We strongly oppose the approval of 1200 Barbara Ann as a bed and breakfast for the property. This is a quiet, family-oriented neighborhood and do not need the commercialization intruding. I believe the commercialization of the property at one location will open the door for more of the same and will subsequently decrease the value of our neighboring properties. From John and Linda Warden, thank you for your letter July 23rd notifying us of the public hearing. Because of the safety concerns, we are opposed to this commercial use at 1200 Barbara Ann property with challenging off-street parking spaces on the inside curve at the bottom of a hill in our residential neighborhood. We first became aware of such use of the property when we met the new occupants at 1200 Barbara Ann while they were on a walk in the neighborhood. They explained to our surprise that they were renting it for a few days as an Airbnb. We have since learned that the property is not owner-occupied, but intended for short-term rental. According to the Airbnb listing, it can accommodate 8 people with no charge for extra guests. We are resident owners of our home, 1208 Barbara Ann, where we have lived since December of 1989. John and Linda Warden. From Steve Sierra, in the matter of 1200 Barbara Ann being allowed to operate as a short-term rental Airbnb, I am against it. I live at 1205 Lytle and not wanting extra traffic or unknown people coming and going each day. Thank you, Steve and Sierra. And that is all of the letters we have. Again, Ms. Robinson and Mr. and Mrs. Calkins did submit letters. They're also in your backup.
You know,
To answer any questions.
I think kind of, you know, our same argument on a previous case applies to this, maybe even more so because it appears that the owner was having trouble enforcing his customers to stay on their property as far as parking goes. That, you know, that lack of enforcement could lead to definitely other problems with the short-term rental. And again, the fact that, you know, short-term renters do not have any accountability held to them on this property once they leave. Whereas long-term renters or a homeowner does have more accountability on what goes on that property. So again, it's my concern that, you know, this type of short-term rental in the middle of a simple, typical residential neighborhood is not appropriate.
If the last one wasn't in the right neighborhood, this one certainly is not in the right neighborhood.
Correct.
I'm confused why you would rent for $100 a night, primarily probably weekends, and not just turn this into a long-term rental. You'd probably make more money on a 3-bedroom house.
I guess it depends on how many short-term rentals you can squeeze in a month, but, yeah,
This one makes me scratch my head.
right. Commissioners, any other thoughts or concerns? Do I hear a motion?
Before we do, can we, at the end, can we have kind of a general conversation about this topic, or when would that be appropriate? Because I have some thoughts about this in general.
Probably best to go ahead and schedule a workshop as part of our next meeting.
Okay.
If that, you think that'd be okay?
Well, I think we're
I
seeing,
mean, it's germane to the topic, so we
Yeah.
can talk about it now.
well, that's fine too. I mean, I think we're gonna see these, we may start seeing these every meeting. And if it's the same thing, then maybe maybe our system is not working. That if we're just seeing the same thing every time,
Right.
arbitrary decision, then maybe we need to look at that more globally as an issue, because it was recently added that it was a conditional use permit in R1.
That's correct. So, little history on that from when the previous zoning code was silent to the short-term rentals. Since they arguably are residential, they were permitted. So we do have quite a number of them within the city, across the city, that are grandfathered. With the adoption of the current zoning code, October 1st of 2019, it became a conditional use permit. One, through the comprehensive plan process, through the zoning code process, or the rewrite of the zoning code, with the public input, the code review committee, of course, planning commission and city council. One of the big things that was brought up was to include a public process for this type of use. As the commission has seen, some locations are appropriate, some are not. Some need additional conditions, some maybe less conditions are still appropriate. So that was kind of the direction through the rewrite of the zoning code, so that they could at least be handled case by case. I know some of our other nearby cities in the region, in the hill country, have more of an influx of short-term rentals than we do, just depending upon the community. Obviously, there's some that have even fewer than we do. But I think you're right. I think it's a growing trend. I'm glad that we have addressed it in some fashion up to this point. And we can certainly at any time readdress the code to see, have we addressed it appropriate, or do we need to make some different actions?
Well, I guess if it's one or two every meeting, I guess that's okay, but if it becomes,
Right.
a dozen every time or something, if it grows to that point, something needs to be different.
And I think that since it's so new, we're just kind of having to flush through some of those right now and establish, as a commission, what we're comfortable with as far as short-term rentals go. Where does it seem appropriate? Where does it not? And that's kind of why I had mentioned earlier, I don't know that we need to rewrite the zoning code to accommodate this, but I think after we go through several of these, we'll see some consistency in our decisions. To me, most notably being locations that are close to amenities, not necessarily just a neighborhood park, but close to downtown, close to shopping, close to our river. And I don't think we need to make those zones really, those residential zones any more special, but I think it does start to establish a pattern in how we view those. And, you know, if at some point we could apply some type of regulation to certain R1 zones that are more accommodating for short-term rental, that may be something worth talking about or looking at. But I think at this stage, the conditional use, looking at each case on a case-by-case basis, based on their own merit, based on input from the neighborhood, I think that's a pretty good way to take it from now. But I do agree that we'll be seeing more of these. But as a commission, so far, I felt like we have addressed each one on its own merit, and I think that that's kind of the best approach for now. But you know, I could see if it's really becoming something that's much more popular and starting to catch an influx, then we may need to look at some other regulation. As for this case, we still have not made a decision yet.
I'll make a motion, we deny it.
I have a motion to deny,
I'll second that.
and we have a motion and a second to deny. All in favor, raise your right hand. Motion carries 7-0. Okay, staff reports.
We do have a meeting scheduled for August 20th. That meeting, we will be looking at our review of the zoning code. If you recall, as the new zoning code went through City Council, they asked that staff take a look 6 months out from adoption to kind of highlight any issues, changes, concerns, new ideas that we didn't think about. So we've kind of been doing that throughout the last year. Of course, with COVID, this would have come much sooner, but we wanted to kind of see how the situation laid out. At this point, we're comfortable bringing that forward to the Planning Commission. We did have a workshop with City Council last month, just kind of highlighting what those topics were with some light discussion with Council. So we're bringing that to you later this month.
Is it possible to add a short-term rental discussion item to that agenda?
Yes, we can.
I think that'd be a good idea.
Well, let me take that back. I will double check. The advertisement has already gone out for that for the public hearing.
Okay.
If nothing else, we can add it as a workshop, as a non-action item.
Okay.
But either way, I'll get it on the agenda
Okay.
For the next meeting.
for the next meeting on August 20th.
Well, we started building a framework of what some of the concerns were, about the being on a thoroughfare. I would exclude schools and school zones, particularly for visitors not knowing traffic patterns, not knowing school locations, or not driving.
Well, I think precedence also needs to come into play. I mean, if you're in a neighborhood where they already exist, then it would make sense.
That too, yeah. So can you staff that up a little bit and think about it,
See what I can do.
please?
Like I said, it may not be for an action item, but at least for a discussion
No,
item.
no, just a discussion points. I know everybody.
Absolutely.
All right. Sounds good.
And I believe, well, we obviously have one case for September 3rd. I don't know if we have any other cases other than the one that's postponed.
Okay.
Deadline's coming up shortly, so.
What do we have for next meeting?
Well, the August 20th is the zoning
that's
code,
right, yeah.
sign code and thoroughfare plan. September 3rd, we have at least one zone case. So,
All
see you
right.
guys then.
Okay. Any other thoughts, commissioners? At 5:14, we are adjourned.